Welcome to another episode of In Your Shoes. I'm Mauro Porcini, PepsiCo's Chief Design Officer. Our core values shape everything we do, from how we do business to how we approach design. I'm quoting my guest of today. He founded his business in his living room. The idea? Offering people a place to stay in his apartment. This business, Airbnb, has gone on to transform the hospitality industry. Airbnb was named Company of the Year by Inc. in 2014 and has made the list of Fast Company's annual top 50 innovative companies 6 times. What makes our guest stand out is that he's done all of it while giving back and staying true to his belief that design is an expression of our most deeply rooted internal values. Joe Gebbia, welcome to In Your Shoes.
Thank you, Mauro. It's great to be here.
So Gebbia, not Gebbia, that's the Italian pronunciation of your last name, right? American would say Gebbia.
I've been saying it wrong my whole life. Only recently did I go back and study the roots of my family back to Sicily. My great-great-grandfather came to New York City in 1900, and I'm in Palermo, in this village south of Palermo called Mezzoiuso, and everyone's saying Gebbia, and I realized, oh man, I've been saying it wrong this whole time. So yes, you got the pronunciation just right.
So GE is Gebbia, is J for Italian. Say bruschetta, we say bruschetta, not bruschetta in Italian. But anyway. So Airbnb, I think everybody in the planet knows Airbnb right now. I want to start without asking a question. Actually, I want to start sharing a story about the beautiful Airbnb experience that I had last year. It was April 2021, and I had to go back to Italy, to Rome, with my fiancée for reasons that were not very nice, for health reasons. And so we had to stay a month in Rome. We didn't know exactly how long we were going to stay. And again, it was not a very nice situation because Rome was in total lockdown, completely total lockdown. So you could go out from your apartment just to walk in your neighborhood. That's all. And we had to stay inside for a month or eventually walk in the neighborhood. So we didn't want to stay in an hotel. And obviously we thank God, actually, not obviously, thank God there was Airbnb. And thanks to Airbnb, we found this beautiful, amazing apartment directly on Piazza Navona with a beautiful little terrace in Piazza Navona, totally accessible. I mean, really inexpensive. We got to know the owner and we're still in touch, a beautiful person. And you made through Airbnb that experience, it was a difficult experience, a little bit better because of we could live in a real apartment instead of being barricaded inside a hotel room. And we could be in a unique location where essentially there is almost no hotel to have that kind of experience. And I am sure you heard thousands and thousands of stories like this, Joe. And so I want to thank you on the behalf of so many people that are having this kind of experiences thanks to you.
Well, it's a beautiful story. I love hearing them every time. And you just really summarized what our company is all about, which is helping people find really authentic local experiences when they travel, places that they might not have had access to before a platform like ours. So I'm so happy you had a great stay in Rome.
Now we always, I was recently back again, is always Airbnb. I mean, it was not my first experience, obviously, as for many people. It's really an authentic way of enjoying traveling and cities and countries and cultures. So how did it all start? You are a designer. You know, we designers know this very well because we're super proud that the designer was able to build what you did. But I'm sure that many people out there in the business world have no clue that the designer was able to build something like this. So we'll talk about your design background and it's been influencing what you do. But can you tell us quickly, how did you come up with Airbnb? How did it all start?
Well, I think to know the story, you have to actually go back a couple of years before the company even started, because it was at design school as I studied industrial design and graphic design, where I met my future co-founder, Brian Chesky. And the reason this is important is because I was on campus. I knew I wanted to start a company one day. And even on the first day of college in orientation, the person presenting to all the young freshmen like me said, look to your left, look to your right. These are your future collaborators. They're your future partners, co-founders, employees even. So spend these next couple of years building relationships, getting to know your classmates, and creating a creative network of sort. And so all throughout RISD, I went to the Rhode Island School of Design. I was looking for that partner, looking for that future business co-founder. And at the end of the 5 years I was on campus, there was one guy at the top of the list, Brian. And I knew because we had worked together in some projects, and we came up with the most innovative, wackiest, craziest ideas out of anybody else in the group. And I remember thinking to myself, if you put him and I in the same room, we can think of big ideas together. So fast forward, it's graduation. The night before, I invite him out to a slice of pizza, and I tell him a premonition that I have. I said, Brian, I have a really strong feeling that we are going to start a company one day, and they're going to write a book about it. He laughed, and I laughed, and it seemed so far-fetched. But it turned out that not only has there been a book, there's been 2 or 3 books written about it. And so, I moved to San Francisco. He moved to Los Angeles. I wanted to be in the tech scene. I had the bug for the internet since I was in high school, making websites on my own, learning HTML, and seeing the power of the internet, that you could publish an idea and the world could have access to it within seconds. And I was completely enthralled by the internet for that reason. And so in 2006, when I was in San Francisco, I moved there. The internet was starting to come back, and more. You may remember 2001, of course, the .com crash. Funding evaporates. People sort of, evacuate San Francisco. But by 2006, it started to come back. Entrepreneurs were starting to move back. VCs were starting to put more money into companies. The kind of media engine was starting to ramp back up again around startups. It was such an exciting time to be there. And so I started recruiting. I get on the phone, I go, Brian, I don't know what you're doing in Los Angeles, but you've got to come to San Francisco. This is where the action is. And so finally, after a year of trying to convince him, he miraculously said yes, very courageously said yes, quit his job, packed his life into his Honda Civic, drove from Los Angeles to San Francisco, arrives late at night one evening. I help him bring his bags up to the apartment. And there we were, the band was reunited. And now it was time to think of the big idea. And there was all this excitement in the room, all this energy that we had of like, oh my God, like what kind of music are we going to create? And so very quickly, things went the opposite direction. We get a letter from the landlord that tells us, I remember opening it, said, Dear Joe, your rent is now 25% higher next month. And I look at this, I'm thinking, my heart sinks. I go, uh-oh. We have a problem here, a math problem. I run my online bank account. I'm looking at Bank of America, and I'm seeing that I've got, roughly $1,000 or so in my bank account. Rent is now $1,500. Brian has the same problem. And suddenly all the excitement vanished like that. Now it's like, oh man, we're going to get evicted if we don't figure out how to make some extra cash in the next couple of weeks. This was a major problem. And so our backs were against the wall, but RISD, they teach you how to create under pressure. And so we pulled out our sketchbooks and we got to dreaming, thinking of ideas. And it was around this time when I'm sitting in the living room and I pull my laptop and I'm looking at a conference, which I think you've been to probably many times, the IDSA conference, which in 2007 was the biggest one they'd done in 20 years. It was the international version, which meant not 1,000, but thousands of people were coming to San Francisco, and all the hotels were completely sold out. And it said in big red letters on the IDSA website, no more hotel rooms, hotels sold out. And I look at this and I think, where are people going to stay coming last minute to the conference? And in that moment, over the top of my laptop, I see the vastness of our living room, which actually wasn't that big. And I think, what if we pulled out my airbed from college when I used to host friends coming to stay with me, and we could inflate it on the floor of this living room? And actually, I got the tape measure out and realized we have room for not just one, not two, but 3 airbeds on the floor of this living room. I emailed Brian and said, "Hey, Brian, what if we hosted designers? We could go to the conference together with them. They could stay with us. We could eat breakfast together. We could, go tour the city, take them to our favorite restaurants." I mean, the idea started to get a lot of momentum. Brian writes back, "I love it. Let's do it." So that night I'm falling asleep in bed thinking, what do we call this thing? It's like a bed and breakfast kind of sort of thing. It's a designer bed and breakfast. That's a little bit narrow, a little niche. Well, what if it's just an air bed and breakfast? I write him back the next day. "What do you think?" "Oh, that's great." So I get the domain airbedandbreakfast.com. I guess I shouldn't be surprised it was available. But we start to have this sort of cycles of, we design the website, we take pictures of ourselves, pictures of the airbed, pictures of the living room, we're showing it off. And we publish this website, airbedandbreakfast.com, and crickets. Nobody knew it existed, of course. Like, no one's going to search that domain. So we emailed the IDSA and we said, "Hey, we have a solution for this housing problem for the conference." And they said, "Oh, we love it. We're going to email all of the attendees to IDSA." We go, yes. So before we knew it, we had over a dozen people emailing us, trying to convince us why they should be the guests on these airbeds. They sent us their LinkedIn profiles, their resumes. They emailed us their design portfolios, trying to say, like, pick me, pick me. And so we picked 3 guests, Kat, Amol, and Michael. They were our original 3 guests. They stayed on our airbeds. They showed up as strangers. They left as friends. We went to the conference every day together. They came back to the warmth of our apartment every night, cooking meals together, sharing stories, getting to know each other, right? Building relationships. And we'll never forget how much it meant to them and meant to us. Picture this. You've been on a lot of business trips. The people listening to this or watching this, everyone's done business travel before. You go to a city or town, you wake up in a hotel room. You're not maybe really sure where you are in the world because they all kind of are somewhat generic and kind of look the same. Now imagine that you go to a conference in San Francisco, and instead of retreating back to one of those more generic hotel rooms, you come back to an apartment, a home that's alive, that's full of friends coming through, food, stories, socially connecting with each other. It was a completely different experience for them. And they loved it.
I'm listening to you, fascinated. I can imagine that moment. And I'm realizing also what a wonderful storyteller you are. How important it is to tell stories in the same way you're telling this story right now. When you build a startup, when you try to inspire your investors and your potential customers and partners, how important is storytelling?
Well, I learned very early on, even at RISD, that design is 50% product and 50% story. I mean, that it really is. If you just focus on the product, but you don't have the story to wrap around it, you haven't really finished the design.
And so it all started in that way. And today, how big is the company today?
Wow. Well, by certain metrics, we have now, from our living room, that one weekend in October 2007, has expanded to living rooms and homes all over the world in 190 countries. And it's about 4 million hosts worldwide who've opened up their homes, including, of course, the one you stayed with in Rome. From a guest standpoint, we've had over 1 billion guest arrivals since the founding of the company in 2008, which is just astounding. I still pinch myself when I hear these numbers. This thing started as like a way to make a rent check, and now it's turned into an economic engine for people around the world. I mean, our hosts have earned in the history of the company a collective $130 billion of income that's gone into their pocket. And so it's an economic engine for a large number of people on our site. It's a way for guests to experience new places when they travel and get a local, authentic experience. And for me, it's been the wildest ride to see, really a dream come true. You have an idea. Any entrepreneur, you sit in the living room or your garage and you tinker and you try to come up with something that people will fall in love with, and that solves a real problem. And I just feel so fortunate, so grateful that I had the right team of co-founders with me, and eventually the right team of in our company to help scale this thing.
And so there are so many designers, non-designers, dreamers that dream of building a startup. And at the beginning, it's so exciting, right? Because you have the idea and you need to make it happen. Then at a certain point when it happens and you start to be successful, things start to change and scale come. Success and scale, they go hand in hand in many, many different cases. And therefore your job change and what you need to do change. And so how did your job change with scale? And think about all the people are listening to us, eventually are starting their startups, and they need to understand at a certain point how to evolve from visionary dreamers, designers of these dreams, to managers and people able to manage operations and scale and people and many other things.
Starting the company is like, as a designer, you've got to do two things simultaneously. You've got to keep your head in the clouds and you have to dream and think about that which hasn't been imagined before. But you've also got to keep your feet on the ground. You've got to be able to prioritize, say no to things, and execute and ship. And so it can be very hard, I think, sometimes for creatives to walk that fine line. But it's a prerequisite, I think, for starting a company as a designer. Now, I feel lucky. In college, I read a biography about Andrew Carnegie. And learning about his life, there was one section that I remembered distinctly, which is imprinted in my brain, which was the part that talked about how he hired people who were better than him. And specifically, his approach to leadership was to be, to have the smarter people in the room than him. And so I've thought about that ever since the beginning of the company. And sure enough, as the company grew and scaled, most of my job was actually recruiting as much as it was designing and building out the design team and trying to find the best designers in the world, the best design managers out there, the best design leaders, the best design researchers, and so on. And so, over the course of many, many years, I built that team out, found those leaders, which freed me up to think about other problems to solve inside the company.
We'll go back to that. I wrote a book about that. I want to ask you what you think are the key characteristics of these leaders, but we get there in a second. But before that, we mentioned multiple times the fact that you are a designer and that's your background. And how did being a designer help you in building an enterprise, a startup, a business? Often people think that designers are not able to do something like this. How did it help you?
Well, I think that one of the biggest misconceptions about design is that it's the way that something looks. I would disagree with that. I think design is actually the way something works. Design is thinking about the end-to-end experience of something. And so for us, we thought about our service from end to end, not just as a web interface or a search UI or a place to list your home, but as an experience that unfolds over time. And I'll give you a quick analogy. Here's something in front of me. This is the case for my AirPods. These are kind of fixed in time, right? It's a piece of hardware that's not going to change. And a lot of people think that's design. Actually, design is thinking about all the steps that came before this and all the things that happened after this. From the time people first hear about AirPods, what's the idea that lives in their mind? What's the experience walking into the store where they see them on a shelf, opening the packaging, turning them on, the first time user experience, the durability of these, how is it designed to last over time, to withstand, being dropped or being lost? How do you find them? All the way to what happens at the end of life for this device. Where does it go? How does it get back into some kind of circular sort of system, hopefully to turn into new AirPods at some point. And so that's design. And we thought about Airbnb at that level. And we took, at one point, we decided to storyboard each of these key moments through the guest journey and through the host journey, taking inspiration from Walt Disney and Snow White, which in the 1930s, he invented color animation, the first 90-minute animation that brought people to tears because they were moved so much. And in doing so, he had this team of hundreds and hundreds of people and said, all right, I need a new way to align everybody, to get them on the same page, to see what it is we're making. And so he also invented the storyboard. Where he literally, frame by frame, up on the wall, every animator, writing, ink artist, lighting set designer could see what it is they were making together. And so pulling from that inspiration, we created our own project. We called it Snow White was the code name for it. And it was a really powerful project because it showed us, and actually the whole company, you didn't even have to be a designer to understand it. It's illustrated storyboards, what it is we were building together. And so to me, design is about designing the holistic experience. So Airbnb, we got into this incubator program in Silicon Valley in 2009. And on the entry to the program, they give you a t-shirt. And on the t-shirt, it has one phrase, which is the motto for the entire program. It says, make something people want. And for us, there couldn't be a better sentence to encapsulate like what is design? Like what does design do? It solves a problem for people, right? Like that's the point of design. And so making something people want, it forces you to think, well, we have to go figure out what they want. And so it forced us to go out into the world to talk to our early hosts, our early adopters, guests and hosts. And we learned so much about what was wrong with our product and what we needed to fix to make it better. And so I think design really requires this balance between having a vision and understanding, within yourselves, your own inspiration, your own imagination, balanced with understanding what people want. And to me, the magic is combining those two things as a designer. So if you can think holistically as designer and then match your imagination with what people want, to me, that is design.
I love this definition. Listening to people, and then you need your imagination to come up with solutions. And I love also the word want, because it embeds the need plus the desire. And this is really, I think, what we do as designers. And you just described one of the superpower of design thinking. For the people listening to us, especially for the non-designers, this is really how we can leverage that approach in every business. Design thinking is like lives at the crossroad between empathy, understanding the people we are serving, strategy, understanding how to build a business around that, but then the power of prototyping, that as a superpower within the power of aligning people, the power of co-creation, because you can have simultaneously different people with different backgrounds co-creating with you. And then the power, I call it the power of the shiny object that inspire others to follow you, to believe in your idea and really build with you whatever you wanna create. It's fascinating that was a big component of how Airbnb started.
Well, if you could say if a picture is worth 1,000 words, a prototype is worth 1,000 pictures.
I love that.
It's true. I mean, there's nothing more convincing than rather than saying, "Oh, there's this concept I have, you're going to love it," versus saying, "I built it, now try it out." I mean, those are two completely different conversations that you have as a designer with somebody that you're trying to inspire.
Look, I've been thinking a lot, obviously, about the value of design all over my life because of my different roles. And recently I published a book that is about design and innovation and leadership in this field, but then it finished talking about how to design your happiness. And I'm mentioning it because there are 3 steps in this journey. And especially the third one reminds me a lot of you, especially, in general, from what I knew about you. And then rereading your bio, I was fascinated by many things that you're doing right now. So what are these 3 steps very quickly? The first one is about self-expression. You need to define yourself and your identity in society. And often you do it through your job, but not necessarily just through your jobs. Sometimes we're not lucky enough to do what we love, but you can still define yourself in relation to others through something you do. The second level is when you give something to others, you give love to others, essentially. You care about others, and usually is family, is people close to you, and is your close community as well. You give something and somehow you receive something back. You don't give to receive something back, but you, in exchange, something is coming back as well. And then there is a third dimension. Often it comes later in life for many of us, not for all of us, but for many come later in life. And this is what I'm talking about when thinking about you. And is the dimension of transcendence, something that transcends yourself. You create something, you do something to give back. You give something to society. And in reality, once again, you're doing it for you in the long run. You're building a legacy. You're defeating death through that because you want to be remembered, for the good that you did to the world. I have goosebumps when I describe it because I wish that everybody was driven by this kind of purpose, no matter the means that you have, and probably would have a better society. But again, you reached that point. I don't know when you started, but for sure there is plenty of evidence of this. I'm talking about your everything you do from a social standpoint, both using your Airbnb platform, but also using your personal resources. Can you tell us a little bit about this effort, from a social standpoint that you have? I mean, you're doing so many different things.
Well, thank you. I love those 3 points, by the way: self-expression, giving, and then doing something that's bigger than you. So I've been very lucky in life. I've been very fortunate in my life, and I feel that along with that comes a responsibility to give back. And I've certainly done things personally, and I've done things through the company to make sure that we are giving back to those who are in need. And I've had a couple of experiences that have informed that. We got involved in Airbnb in thinking philanthropically in 2012. When Hurricane Sandy hit New York City. And if you rewind and remember back to those moments in October of 2012, people were stranded. Tens of thousands of people lost their homes, and there was nowhere to go. And the very next day, we get an email from Shell, one of our hosts in Brooklyn, a super host. She says, "Dear Airbnb, I would love to volunteer my extra guest rooms to those displaced by Hurricane Sandy. How do I do that?" At the time, you had to have a transaction with a credit card to book a reservation. And we quickly discussed in the company and said, well, why? Why not reconfigure our entire system to allow Shell and many others like her to volunteer their homes for free to those in need? So we did exactly that. It was an engineering marathon, pizza boxes and Red Bulls, 48 hours straight, all-nighters, the whole thing. And 2 days later, we emailed Shell and every other host in New York and said, if you'd like to join in this effort, you can host those displaced. The next day, we get a call from Mayor Bloomberg's office saying, we want to partner with you to help promote this because we need resources on where to send the people. And that was really the beginning of what is today Airbnb.org, which is where we're able to leverage our platform to house people in times of crisis. So if you think about what's you can say our superpower as a company, well, we have this global network of hosts. We have this robust internet platform, and we know how to connect strangers, fairly quickly. And so if we were to leverage that and take the same booking technology that makes it easy to match to a great vacation, what if we were to match people to a shelter, to a home, as they're being evacuated from a hurricane or from a wildfire or fill in the blank? And so over the years, we've now housed 100,000 people in over 70 countries worldwide, largely based on the generosity of our host community to take in people who really need shelter. And so it's been one of the most unexpected but fulfilling elements of the last 14 years is building a great business of obviously, but on the back of that also happened to be building one of the largest humanitarian housing platforms that exists on the planet. And so, we've gotten involved in things beyond natural disasters. So the refugee crisis in 2016, when that really hit the headlines and became a worldwide topic, we said, well, how could we possibly help with this? And it turns out there was one area, which is when asylum seekers land in a new country, before they've got a lease on a long-term place, they need a place to stay. So from the time they land at the airport, we are able to match them with hosts on our site for short-term accommodations. And so that got us involved in the topic of refugees. And so since then, we've refined our product. We've established incredible partnerships with different government agencies and others. And so recently in the summer of 2021, as the Afghan situation was unfolding with all the evacuations, the very next problem that they have is they come to the United States, and where are they going to stay? And so we were able to partner with different parts of the government, with all the resettlement agencies. And we made a commitment as a company to help. And so our commitment was to house 20,000 Afghan families coming to the United States. And just in the last couple of months, we are already up to 15,000 people who have found shelter through Airbnb.org. So it's been just one of the most beautiful expressions of generosity at scale from our host community. And it's been fun to see how our company does what I think most companies are doing or will need to do in the future, which is to participate in society, to find ways to be beneficial to society around us and not just operate in the silo of, we're just a business and that's all we do. But I think more and more it will be, employees, customers, maybe one day even investors will more and more will demand that companies actually do more to benefit the societies that we operate in.
And do it in an authentic way. I mean, what you're doing is authentic. I mean, you didn't mention it, and that's very elegant from you, but you're also investing your personal wealth in a variety of different ways. I was reading that you are one of the youngest member to join the Giving Pledge of Bill and Melinda Gates with Warren Buffett, essentially a commitment to give more than half of your wealth in philanthropy. This is one of the many examples of that authenticity I'm talking about. And now I'm thinking about the many business leaders that are listening to us. And now one of the trendy words in the world of business, big and small, is purpose, right? And purpose makes sense when it's done in an authentic way. Purpose makes sense when there are business leaders behind those brands that really believe in what they're doing and they do it consistently, authentically, for real. So I think it's a beautiful example of what you're doing in Airbnb from that standpoint. By the way, I have to thank you through Design Vanguard. Joe and Tim Brown, the former CEO of IDEO, put together this initiative, Design Vanguard, a series of design leaders with different backgrounds to brainstorm about how design can give back to society. And so thanks to you, I met my counterpart at the Coca-Cola company, James Somerville, the former head of design there. We got together in the moment thinking really how we could work together, even if we come from competing companies, to give back. And then we became friends. But can you tell us more about Design Vanguard? What is it and what was it?
Well, I love that story because that so summarizes and captures the spirit of what the Vanguard's all about, which is that there are problems in the world that are bigger than any single company has in front of them. And so what if we, align our expertise and our networks and our, capabilities to go after bigger problems. And so I think, if the two of you ever collaborate on something, let me know, because I think that would be an incredible conclusion or outcome of the Design Vanguard. But really, it's bringing together creative leaders from business, from tech, from social sectors, and trying to leverage our resources and influence to create more of a just, a safe, a beautiful world, to find ways where design can be beneficial to society. And so the event, we've held it twice in Northern California. And it's been a wonderful moment to bring together people from these different backgrounds of business and tech and social sectors to really find opportunities to come together. And so those who have signed on to the Vanguard, designers are being held to higher ethical standards. We want to shape a generation of designers that reflect rich diversity of the world that we actually live in, and push to the edges of what design means for humanity. Thinking about individuals, communities, and even systems. For example, I know Design Vanguard was pretty active as COVID-19 started up in 2020 to think, how can design help this global problem?
I want to close talking about people. I profoundly believe that this idea of this circle from people to people, or people in love with people, as I like to define them, is the most important driver of everything. We can have processes, tools, strategies, all kind of tech platforms, but at the end of the day, it's always an idea coming from somebody to help somebody else. And so we talk a lot about the receiving side of it, the people we serve, the social impact. But earlier you mentioned the people in your team, the people thinking, surrounding yourself with people that are even better than us. What are the key traits, the key characteristics of these leaders that you search for your own organization?
The first thing that comes to mind, and the first thing we look for, is they have to be passionate about our mission. They have to be passionate about the world of travel, around connecting people, around what does it look like if we made the world a little bit smaller, where we all understood each other a little bit more because we were able to connect people in a home somewhere else in the world, where they could understand the other that much more. And of course, that doesn't happen every time on Airbnb, but in our peak moments, that's what unfolds on our site. So passion to forward a mission like that. I'd say second is creativity. People who, have a creative mindset, people who, think very openly, they're curious in their approach. And then third, I would say, has to do with work ethic, of people who just love to work, people who find passion in their work, people who find, self-discovery in their work, people who are just, students of their own craft.
And Joe, you look like a very nice person. How important is kindness in your company and for your leaders?
I think that's a prerequisite. Come on, right? There's a famous Simon Sinek, a famous author and TED speaker, that studies the best, highest performing teams on the planet. And he spent time with, companies and corporations and governments and militaries. And within the militaries, he spent time with the highest performing Navy SEAL team of all, SEAL Team 6. And he shows a diagram. And on one axis, there's performance. And on the other axis, there's trust. And what he's shown and he's learned from them is that if you have high performance but low trust, you don't make the SEAL Team 6. You could be the best in the world at what you do. But if you don't have the ability to create trust with those around you, you don't get on the team. They'd rather have somebody with high trust and slightly lower performance on SEAL Team 6. And I think that's just, one vignette of it summarizes how important trust, kindness, and camaraderie are on teams.
I love, by the way, the speech of Simon that I know very well. I've been studying a lot on kindness because I profoundly believe that this is very important. No matter your business, no matter your performance, it should be just a condition sine qua non, as they say in Latin, a condition to operate, just because of an ethical reason. But beyond that, you're right. I mean, it also drives better performance, better efficiency, better synergy inside this organization. It's so powerful. I do think that the opposite of trust and kindness is an invisible cancer, and I call it cancer because you don't see it. And when you realize it, it's often too late. And so, anyway, look, I will keep talking with you for hours, but we need to wrap up. I just want to thank you for the time you dedicated to us today, but mostly also for the inspiration that I'm sure you gave with your stories to so many people. And thanks for everything you're doing with Airbnb, not just for the magic experiences you are gifting all around the world to people like me. I started sharing one of those, but also for everything you're doing through your platform to give back to society. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Mauro. It was a pleasure seeing you.